and welcome back to The Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am, as always, Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy, although most folks know me as Bob the Wizard. And I am, as always, a pure and open channel for the finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here, in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. This channel has become And welcome back to The Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy, although most folks know me as Bob the Wizard. And I am, as always, a pure and open channel for the finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here, in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. Well, thank you for indulging a wizard in his last videoette, wanderings through my biker years. I've entitled this little videoette, as it had to come, Black Dog Days, Black Wolf Days. Now, as well as there being Bob the Scientist, Bob the Biker, and Bob the Baby Wizard, life was pretty good. The millennium had changed. The long foreseen disasters had not happened. The world hadn't collapsed. The internet didn't explode. Life pretty much carried on. But my working life at the MOD was starting to change. Now, we'd seen the launch of the great big corporation. A drive at the time which seems to have been insidious, if I'm honest, throughout the rest of my life. And while everything has its place, and I really do mean this, it's taken me a while to come to terms with it, that there is a place for corporate work and there is a place for work which is service. And in my mind there's always been a differentiation in that. These things have their places. The fact that the corporate world, corporate ethics, corporate speak, training courses, customer care, endless form fillings. The bits that in the old civil service were frustrations to me became more intense. I started to lose my spark at work. At the time we were doing performance development, and all amongst my many exciting bits of training which were of use, like first aid training clearly, fire training which is always useful, there was just reams of corporate, basically bullshit as I saw it and see it. Wasn't what I signed up for. It wasn't the kind of world that I wanted to be living in. And to be honest, the draw of my outside wand-making wizardly ways was starting to make good money. So in a sensible move I went for the standard work-life balance and I dropped to a 4-day working week. And for a couple of years that worked well. That balance of being able to live the two sides of me, for want of a better way of looking at it. The scientist at work, increasingly frustrated, the increasingly awakening wizard, interested in life, the universe and everything. It's starting to pull me apart. The two different worlds were parting. And in many ways I should have just made a clean break. But I am human, with all the human foibles, one of which is my survival issues. I was paid well. I wasn't prepared to make the full jump into a more spiritual way of earning my money. And that started to reflect, not necessarily my work. I lost interest in work. I still enjoyed my range days. Any time that was outdoors, that was what I used to do. But as I said, it became increasingly more corporate focused. I became increasingly frustrated. Journeys home, please bear in mind that the good lady was working at the same establishment, just became moans. This isn't right, that isn't right, why don't they this, why don't they that? And in a relatively short space of time, I started to really fade from the space, I suppose. Now, I should have taken this little incident, peak, as an example of why I should be leaving. I said I'd become disinterested. My staff reviews, bless them, started to read along the lines of, if Bob became any more laid back, he'd be horizontal. And my aspirations, and I mean this, I was writing this on my career aspirations, were that I'd be redundant within 5 years. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Redundant due to world peace. A pipe dream? Yeah, maybe. Something that I would love to experience in the future? Yes, of course. But I think it was clear that part of me was kicking back, rebelling, as I always do. On one notable incident, I was sitting in my office, actually doing my work for a change, and my boss, the big boss, the grade 7, breezed through the door, an office I was sharing with Robert, and another colleague, bless him. Well, sat there, I looked up, the boss came in, he looked straight at me, looked around and went, well, where's Bob? I need to speak to him. Can you get him to come to my office? Turned round and walked out the door. At which point I looked across the desk, literally went, you can see me, right? Genuinely a weird moment. Now, prior to that conversation, although I was working, we had drifted into some metaphysical conundrum that often occupied our lunchtimes. Was that a shift in space? Was that the universe there? Or was just got so used to the fact that I was off doing anything but sitting at my desk filling out endless reams of paperwork. Well, without boring you in the long drop down, that pull came to a peak on an instant, strangely reflective, way back from my Northern Ireland days. I was running a range day, the standard demonstration, what all the various items, explosive items, bits of gunpowder that folk may encounter during their working life and some of their effects. They run for people that worked in laboratories, other members of staff, visiting dignitaries. It was a standard part of my work, or our work. Second nature. Well, one day we were running slightly late, and as always happens on that day, the great group of dignitaries had finished their conference early and arrived early. In the rush and the confusion, basically, there was some cross-wiring had occurred, unbeknown to me. So, standing up, as per the Sato of the time, drawing your attention to stand 1 and stand 15, and bang. Realising that we got a bit of a problem, I did the sensible thing, turned round, pretty much bluffed it, as was previously bluffed with, things will go bang, and once it's gone bang, I'll tell you what it was all about beforehand. And so with the rest of the demonstration ran, I thought no more of it. Really didn't think anything more of it. Party dispersed, we chalked it up to experience. They had arrived early, we were running a little bit late. What should we have done? Stopped, sent them away and rewired. What did we do? Trying to please the customer as per the corporate standard, eh? No excuse, but it's sort of the mindset. And how it had changed. While I thought no more about it, clearly words had been had, and I was then summoned within a day or so to the boss's office, whereupon my firing licence was taken from me. and I was pretty much walked to the door, pending full inquiry as a result of an incident on the range. No more details given. Now, I've had a few close scrapes that I will not mention. Well, a couple that I did mention. But up until that point, I really had blameless career. I felt that I'd given 110%. I'd served, I'd placed myself in danger. I thoroughly enjoyed it and gained a lot from it, but I'd volunteered for those roles. We'd served a purpose, and to be treated like that on one error, one literally first mistake, to be boarded like that, it sent a little bit of me over the top. Now, as this is a Black Dog Days, I should mention my mental health prior to those poorer days of the fall. I'd always been quite buoyant, vibrant. I will have the odd day. My dad used to call them Blue Thunder days, where I will literally be thundering at the world, the injustices of it all. But for the most part, it's just a part of me. It's always under control, just accepted. It still gets voiced from time to time, believe me. But other than that, really, I'd had a few knocks. I'd certainly worked for a long time under a lot of pressures. I'd certainly seen what I saw. Work-related issues breaking down as systems changed, not the way that I like to work. Personal differences with the system, not with any of the individuals. They're all reasonable human beings. They all have families to feed, so this is definitely not a dig at any individual, just the system. I felt poorly treated, as you can gather. It all broke over the course of, I think it was a family birthday weekend, and at the meal table I was obviously very low. I burst into tears. No, don't get me wrong, I'm certainly not one of those fellas that won't cry. Recent years I've been wailing on Facebook often enough. But at the time, that was unusual. And so I was duly dispatched to the doctor. Now, he asked me where I worked. Given the nature of my work, given the fact that relatively recently we had lost a work colleague, which I can't mention any details. The work we do is dangerous, or did is dangerous. We'd lost a colleague. A small part of me, I suppose, and several others felt that maybe if we'd have been involved, would it have happened? Hindsight, the way the mind runs. The fact that I was stressed at work, a good lady was in the same environment, just another layer of stress. You never break away from work. And strangely, without details, because we worked in different areas, that's how our system worked. While you can discuss the generalities of work, the detail is just can't be mentioned. Everything building up that pressure, and then that final, what I felt was a rather public slapping over a relatively minor incident that I felt was well managed. That pushed me over the edge into a very dark space. I plummeted. I literally plummeted, and I found myself, and was regularly found, quite literally sitting, watching space, quite rocking, but just shut off from the world. The doctor prescribed me some antidepressants. And I'll have to say that over the course of those next few days, I really don't think they agreed with me. I became increasingly drifty. I got to the stage where I was decided that I couldn't work. I'd been signed off of work. I was all over the place, emotionally, mentally. Maybe it was 15 years of working at that intensity at times, the frustrations of the way it was. These things break. And once the dam had broken, I was faced with this dark space. Now, I've been low before. And I think as anybody who's watched this, who's watching this, will know, depression is a very different thing. absolutely incapacitated. We withdraw from people that we love, hold them at a distance, and just lock off. It's a terrible disease. I certainly had found myself in a dark place. I was recommended for some psychiatric assessment. Clearly I was struggling, given the nature of the work and a mild diagnosis of PTSD. Although I didn't have any trauma in Ireland, there was pressure, but no actual trauma. Of course, at the time, this condition, which I now have, by the way, that's accident related, not work related. Anyway, in that dark space, I phoned up my mum. I thought, standard thing, go back, chat to mum. And in walking 4 or 5 miles between our houses, I got lost, metaphysically and completely physically. Familiar landmarks, places from my childhood, were there, but how they connected up just wasn't working. I had to phone my mum and literally be walked home, talked down roads to a home that I was lived from the age of 3 in. Dark days for me, forgive me, but they do need to be shared because the journey is a complete journey. I think I did about a week, maybe a little more on the tablets, and found myself in some very dark places. If this was it, if this was how I was going to be treated, if all of that, I'd fall on my sword. Bizarre thoughts. A dream or flash of riding my bike and looking at the bridge stanchion. If only I'd just, rather than lifting my head up, drop my head into it. No one had known. Bob the biker, living his dream. I clearly needed to speak to the doctor and found out that it could be a side effect of that medication. Would I like to change? The answer to that was, at the time, as a Reiki master, with all of that knowledge and that support network, I decided that the chemical route was not the route for me. And so basically, I flushed them down the toilet. Not a very environmentally sound thing, and for that I can but apologise, Mother Earth. The fact that there was a load of fish that weren't particularly depressed about being caught, or possibly suicidal fish. Hey, who knows? I continued to go to see the doctor. He was coming to the end of his career, was seeing the same stresses and strains with a system that wasn't what he'd signed up to. And I think I found a degree of empathy there, really. It was clear that a return to work with the frustrations was just making part of me boil up. It was clear, even to him, that even though he didn't understand what I was doing, that this was in some way bringing me into a balance. Logically, if you're doing something that you love every day, making wands, healing, helping, it's got to lift. So provided I wasn't engaged with work, or work weren't putting me through the boards, my life started to gain a bit more balance. I lifted out of that dark, dark space of just sitting, running around and around and around with the same thoughts of betrayal. I said, days lightened. The board came about and I was exonerated completely. The full system had run. I understand that the managers, with recent deaths within the establishment, that they felt that they needed to run it that way. Water under the bridge. What I felt at the time, strangely, has lifted. It served its purpose, and then I needed to move on. I was medically retired on ill health. That gave me a little bit of a boost. And I left 16 years of service. Now, apart from that little 16th, the dark plummet at the end, they were good years, as I've shared. I met exemplary human beings, and the way that I was treated, how I came out of it, are mild in comparison to those who I still know. Working in these areas, it gave me a window. Some of the effects of working in those conditions, certainly having been through that process myself, have I ever got that dark since? Once. But it was very much part of the journey then. I'd got to a point where things needed to change. And so I left. A small sum of money, much of which was taken back. Just signed it off. Wanted closure. Wanted it finished. Chapter done, and time to move on into lighter times. And so, having left my black dog days, which have now become, as you've heard, far more of a series of wonderful when-I stories. They were good days. And as I said in closing, this is just my little part, my story of those years. The effects of war, of conflict, ripple on for generations. Certainly ripple on in the mental health of those that have been exposed to these extreme experiences. The fact that as a society we're starting to see that, take account of that, is showing that we are making at least some improvements. That our mental health is in a crisis given what we've all lived through of late is not surprising. Do I share this to drag you into? Hopefully not. Far from it. You've seen the vibrant, buoyant side of me post-depressions. Because that's how life is. A series of knocks. We fall to our knees. We shake ourselves off. We pick ourselves up. And in that process, we learn resilience and we gain a greater understanding of ourselves, both in light and in dark. Can I blame anyone else for my experiences? Certainly not. I know that I signed up for it. I signed back up for it. Thank you for listening to a difficult time in my life. A very trying time of my life. But it's made me the man, the wizard that I am today. As all experiences do. Thank you. Take care, go well, and blessed be. And in my next little video, we'll go a lot lighter. It's a lot more fun being a professional hippie than a deeply, deeply depressed scientist, frustrated with the system, where the focus has moved from service into profit. Something we may be wise to address in our world.